From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm happy to have you here. When it comes to instantly recognizable, iconic TV themes and music, the one name that comes to rhythmic mind is the multi-award-winning Mike Post. The likes of the A-Team, L.A. Law, The Rockford Files, and The Greatest American Hero are just a few of the seeming hundreds of incredible themes that are imprinted on boomers' minds, while any number of divisions of Law and Order continue on their criminal hunting merry way to keep Post's beyond catchy work as vibrant on reruns as he is in the present TV landscape. It's more than enough of a career for Post to create a passion project that luxuriously conjures the great southern outdoors and its attendant waters, all as heard in a powerful concept album, Message from the Mountain and Echoes of the Delta. It's music awash in bluegrass, the blues, rock and roll, and the symphony, as this former Wrecking Crew member collects any number of great musicians to unleash electric guitar, dobro, and a massive percussive hoedown. It's a tone poem of instrumentals, song, and stirring narration that at once harkens to Mike Post's soundtrack work and an imagination steeped in rip-roaring Americana. Here, a true musical land of the free for a composer given a chance to strut his melodic imagination like never before. And now here's a composer with the themes of your TV lives, who now paints his own American musical pictures. Let's welcome the Mike Post Totality.
Totality, eh? Okay, well,
not here in LA.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, thanks for having me on.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here, Mike. And it's such a really remarkable album. What was the spark of it?
COVID, to be honest. It wasn't something that I, had in the back of my mind as, something I'd like to do in the future or anything like that. I was just, sort of on hiatus, as we say, because of the pandemic. And I was in my car listening to some bluegrass music, and I went, gee, I wonder if anybody's written a concert piece for a bluegrass rhythm section and a big orchestra. And I sort of knew that nobody had. But I made sure nobody had, and I thought, well, you know what? I'm probably the right guy to do it because I used to be, a folkie, and I was pretty familiar with bluegrass music, very familiar, and a huge fan. And I'm certainly comfortable with the orchestra. So, I started on it and did it the old way with pencil and paper, and and once I had about 3 or 4 small little chunks of it done, I thought, gee, if this works for bluegrass, it'll obviously work for a blues rhythm section and an orchestra. So the two pieces kind of happened simultaneously.
Now, I want to give a big thanks to Sony Classical for providing 5 soundtrack giveaways for our listeners. And our first question is from Louis Versinelli, and he would like to know, hey, Mike, I'm a big fan of all your work, but my question is, how difficult was it to develop ideas for your new album, either out of the blue or in your head, as opposed to scoring music by watching it on screen, which is, I assume, your technique?
Yeah, that's an insightful question, really. So the way music happens in my within me is odd. I can read a script, I can look at a picture, I can be told a story by one of my dear friends that's a writer, or I can just open my heart and open my mind and just start writing it. It's all sort of the same dipping of a ladle into the well. It's accessible to me naturally. I sit down to dream about music while awake, and something comes out, and it doesn't matter whether the you know it doesn't matter whether it comes from looking at a picture or reading a script or being told a story or just imagining. It honestly, um, it's not difficult for me to write music. I love writing music, and it feels very natural to me.
Wow. I mean, I just love how you use the orchestra in this album. And it really, parts of it reminded me a lot of Aaron Copland. Was that an influence as well?
Oh God, yes. I mean, and look, Daniel, you're one of the guys that knows how we do this, and yes, of course. Now, was Dvorak and the New World Symphony in my life? Did that precede Aaron Copland? Yes, it did. Did Randy Newman follow Aaron Copland? And have I been influenced by Americana music, American music? Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, the trail, is a long trail, and it's littered with massive talent. Aaron Copland being one of the giants.
Yeah, he really was the concert pianist, the concert master who put the idea of Americana concept pieces on the map. Really these beautifully evocative use of symphony again, which you definitely have here.
Yes, I do think that Dvorak was the first to go on to make a statement saying, "Listen, you guys, the Indian and Negro melodies, as they were called by critics of the late 1800s, and they were sort of looked down upon. It's like, and Dvorak, said in an article in the New York Times right after he premiered the New World Symphony, you guys don't get it. You don't appreciate what you have here at home in America. You think that Europe is the answer for everything inspirationally, musically, and it's not. What you have here at home is fantastic." So Dvorak really first.
Absolutely. So we'll be jumping in about your career during the show, and we've got a question from Esteban Cortez. And my mother and I are huge fans of the original Law and Order. Wonderful theme. My question: what are the biggest differences, musically speaking, from the early days of the show to nowadays?
I would say the biggest difference in my deal and my process musically is there's much more music now in SVU, in Law and Order, the original, and certainly in the other spinoff that's going now, Organized Crime. There's much more music. When it originally started, it was almost a documentary. It was 4 or 5 cues, 6 cues max in the interior of the show. Of course, the main title and the end credits, they always stay the same, but or they've stayed the same, I should say. But nowadays, the style of network television is to accompany many more scenes with music, and we're part of that trend.
The thing I really love about the album is that there are elements of it that recall your TV work. There you can kind of hear the mic post sound in it, but yet it's kind of wrapped into a whole other different approach.
Indeed, yeah. First of all, just from a nuts and bolts standpoint, because your show's so great at going into this process of putting music to film, whether it's film for television or film for streaming or film for theatrical, it's all the same. It's the same deal. It's our job as composers for film is to make the happier parts happier and the sadder parts sadder and the scarier parts scarier, so on and so forth. Okay, well, my career, if you look back on it, it's long, since the first time I, put music to film was with my late terrific partner, Pete Carpenter, back in 71, 72. The first series was, I believe, 73 with Toma, and then 74 with Rockford Files. So what have we been working on all this time? Well, mainly cop shows, law shows, some medical shows, but always drama, some comedy, but mostly drama. Oh yeah, we've been in minor keys mostly, to create tension and to accompany murder, mayhem, and all the rest. Okay, well, wait a second. These pieces weren't handcuffed by that. These pieces were wide open to any sensibility that is contained within bluegrass is contained within the blues. So that's why that's the biggest difference is there was no guidance to like, well, you had to be minor,
Right. And kind of like along that line, here's a question from Aaron Cruz. Hey, Mike, your credits in the crime legal drama and police procedural genre are quite impressive. How do you approach scoring for that world? Was that process different from your approach to scoring content outside of the genre? For example, Running Brave or Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, the movie.
Wow, this guy really did some research because nobody knows Running Brave and very few people saw Dr. Quinn, the movie. So at any rate, in answer to your question, yes, it was the same job because it's music. They bring me their art. I put my art with it, and hopefully the whole thing's more artful. Well, so in that regard, those two features were exactly the same, one for theatrical, one for TV. Basically, making it more dramatic. So it didn't differ a lot from Law and Order, except that Law and Order has a pretty tight lane musically to work within. And every time I sort of stray too far outside the lane, I get a telephone call from Dick Wolf going, "Are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? Stay in your lane." Well, okay, all right, yeah. So Dr. Quinn was much different, and it was a little bit wider in certain ways. Running Brave was completely different because it reflected this fantastic, athletic performance by a guy named Billy Mills, who's a Native American rather, that won a gold medal in the Olympics. Well, that's different than Cops and Robbers, that's for sure.
I really love the songs on the album. And, obviously immigration is a really big hotbed issue. And there's a really quite beautiful narration piece about the Darien Gap, which is what a lot of immigrants very perilously try to get here through. Why the Darien Gap? Again, the idea of what it takes to get into this country?
So, the more I worked on that piece, the message from the mountain side of the album, in quotes, the more it became about immigration to me. The more I saw that aesthetically, the music I was writing spoke to people coming from all parts of the world to get to America. So I sat with this dear friend of mine named Mark Wilding, who's a writer. He's a showrunner. He ran Grey's Anatomy for many years and then went on to run Scandal. And he's a playwright. He's just really a smart guy. And I said, I have an idea, Mark, to precede this piece with a narration about immigration. He goes, God, I was just reading and enthralled with the struggles with this one piece of the world, 80 miles, almost impassable, called the Darien Gap. And he said, yeah, well, you could talk about that. And I said, well, why don't you write something? and then I talked to him about the way my grandfather came from Ukraine and the way that my wife's ancestors came from Ireland. And so he wrote a beautiful piece. It's about 6 minutes long, and Amy Keys, great singer, great actor, was kind enough to speak it. And I actually didn't write the music to accompany it until she had spoken it, and we recorded it, and then that was the inspiration for that part.
Wow, yeah, it's such a powerful piece. And among our audience today, we have some LA session royalty who played on the original guitar on the A Team and Magnum PI. It's Steve Watson, who's got a question for you. How could you talk about, or could you talk about how you were introduced to the blues and bluegrass growing up in Los Angeles?
Well, first of all, let's state the obvious. Steve Watson, genius guitar player. I mean, just a killer. He and I met Steve through Bruce Hornsby. Watson, what a great player. What a great guy. Had a terrific run here as a part of the Wrecking Crew. And certainly I was privileged to stand in front of orchestras and rhythm sections that Steve played in, and just a terrific guy. So, my background is, middle class Jewish kid from the Valley, looking for a dusty road to walk down, sort of like that guy from Hibbing, Minnesota, Bobby Zimmerman, Dylan. Same deal. I heard Lead Belly and Pete Seeger and Joan Baez and all these people as a folkie growing up, Lightning Hopkins, John Lee Hooker, Son House. And I just said, wow, how do I get involved in this? How do I learn this? And I did. And that's how it happened. Sure, I wasn't from, Tennessee or Mississippi or any place else back there. But the minute I heard the music from the South, I had it in my heart. I don't know why it just struck a chord with me of like, I heard B.B. King and I knew I'd heard the blues version of Bach. It's like, okay, if you want to play guitar and you want to play the blues, why don't you start with this, and then when I heard Robert Johnson, the same thing. I just went, okay, that's it. That's what I need to learn. And, it just expanded with Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin and all that. And on the blues side and bluegrass, it was honestly one album. When Flatt and Scruggs released Foggy Mountain Breakdown album, I just went, this is the greatest stuff I've ever heard. I have to learn how to navigate in this world. I have to learn about this. And that opened up everything to Jim and Jesse and the Osbournes and, and Herb Peterson, who, we still to this day, one of my best friends and a huge influence over me musically. It just has turned me on to so much great music and just been such an inspiration. His playing is unbelievable. So there's your answer, Steve. It's like, I don't know. That stuff just ran me over like a train,
No, it's just great. And in terms of guitars, here's a question from Dale for this album. Can you talk about the incredible guitar players featured in this project, like Eric Gale, Sonny Landreth, and how you approached involving them? They're not typically thought of as session players.
Yeah, well, that opens up for me to answer it with some information, which was one of the things that was most challenging about this. But honestly, in the end result, looking back on it, is I think its strongest point. Bluegrass players and blues players aren't normally readers of music. They are hearers and then changers and executors of what they've heard. Orchestras don't jam. So here you have two different entities, the orchestra and the rhythm section. The rhythm section does, in these cases, usually doesn't read much, and if at all. And the orchestra, which never jams as an orchestra, the only time there's anything close to that, it's in a cadenza for a soloist. So I thought to myself, well, how do I get the conversation that is the blues and bluegrass? And what I mean by that is, if I'm playing guitar in a blues band, what I'm playing is greatly affected by what the bass player, drummer, keyboard player, everybody else is playing. I hear something from them and I get inspired. Same exact thing in bluegrass. We know what the chord changes are usually, but we're jamming. It's explosive from an inspirational standpoint, both in the blues and in bluegrass. So the way we did this was I sketched these little tunes. I sent them to the rhythm section players, mocked up or played by me or hummed by me, whatever. So they didn't have to read anything except maybe the chord changes, the chord charts. And then I had them in and accomplished their parts with mocked up little orchestral accompaniments. Then they played. Then I went back and redid the orchestral stuff to reflect what the rhythm section had played. And then I had the rhythm section back in to play again. And then I did it again with the orchestration. So we were able to have a not simultaneous conversation, but a virtual conversation that ended up where a lot of what the rhythm section guys came up with and interpreted then reflected in the orchestration and vice versa. So that's number one. That's the thing that made this thing possible. So in the case of Sonny and Eric Gales, now you have to understand who these people are. This is basically Mozart. This is basically Eddie Van Halen. This is basically Jimi Hendrix. This is basically Liszt or Brahms, or these are giants. These are Martians. Nobody plays like Sonny Landreth. The stuff he does behind the slide, you can't even do that. Nobody does that. He calls it ghosting, but it's so outside. It's like Eddie going, thinking, oh my, okay. So in the case of Eric Gales, upside down, backwards. Left-handed guitar player playing a regular right-handed guitar without restringing it. And a vibrato, a shake that is as extraordinarily individual as BB's shake, okay? Well, those guys, they're geniuses. They're both of them. So to walk them through it, their musical knowledge is so great. Their ears are so big. Their facility is so huge. There's nothing that I can conceive of that they can't play. And then if I give them a basic roadmap, then they take me on this magical tour, and then I go reflect it in the orchestra. Wow. I love the way this came out because I love that marriage,
Yeah, no, it's really something else. Now, we've got a question from Dan Power Ranger. Mike, who's your favorite film score composer?
There isn't one. My idols, when I first started noticing, oh, wait a minute, listen to that music accompanying these films or television shows. So my idols were first Henry Mancini, Jerry Goldsmith, Dave Grusin, and Johnny Williams. So to me, I grew up going, okay, I don't think you can do that much better. You want to learn how to write a military show, just go listen to Patton. Okay. You want to learn how to do a Western. Okay. I left out Alfred Newman. Go listen to How the West Was Won. Bruce Broughton, Silverado, not such a bad score. Oh man, firepower. The worst John Williams has ever been. The worst is great. All right. He just never whiffs. He's just tremendous. But there's younger guys that absolutely kill me. Not the least of which is Randy Newman. Not the least of which is Tommy Newman. Okay, there's so many great composers out there that I get absolutely inspired by their work. It's funny. I don't feel competitive with anybody. I just look at it like we're all in the band and we're all brothers and sisters. So even the guys that I'm dear friends with, like Alan Silvestri or Snuffy Walden, or they're my friends, but I also sit back and watch what they do and go, oh man, this is so good. This is wonderful writing, and a wonderful example of what I do for a living. And I'm hoping I hope to be anywhere in the same conversation with all these guys that I look up to.
Now, a wonderful mixer who works with Alan Silvestri is Dennis Sands, and he did such a good job mixing this album. Really, just punch and power to it.
Well, let's be honest, okay? There's about 3 or 4 guys, and he, for me, he's the best of them. And for me, Sean's great too. And there's a number of really great mixers that are working, but Dennis, this guy's a warrior. I mean, this guy won't quit, and he's really knowledgeable, and he's very technical, and yet he's like a player, because he's creative, and he listens to the music, not just the technical audio side of things. He really listens to the music, and he was a great part of this album.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I'm like a child of 70s television, and these themes that you've done are just ingrained in my mind and millions of people's minds. Was there a point when you were doing these themes where you're like, okay, I got this. I just have this ability to write these instantly iconic themes?
No. Uh, no. I, you know, like I said, the first thing that really struck me was probably Peter Gunn. But then Wild Wild West, and, a ton of TV themes, really resonated with me. And then when Pete and I got hired, I thought to myself, hey, what are we really trying to do here? Well, I was raised on TV and the radio. So to me, the marching orders was, well, why don't you be like Mancini? Why don't you write a 1-minute hit record? So that's what I was after. And that's what Pete and I as partners were after. And when it came true, I never sort of swam in the water behind me. It was always next. And up until just recently, up until the last year, have I really had the time or the inclination to focus on the rear view mirror and really look in there and go, what the hell happened here? I've just been so happy to be busy with next. And, here I am, I'm pushing 80. My next birthday, I'll be 80. And I'm going, oh yeah, why don't you take, 5 minutes and look in a rearview mirror? So now that I look back on it, I go, well, yeah, I guess I did. I guess I did it with Pete for, the first 16, 17 years. And then when Pete got ill and passed away, okay, and I was on my own. Yeah, I was able to do it on my own as well. And I'm proud of that. I certainly am. I think what I'm most proud of, though, honestly, is that I never let Cannell, Bochco, Dick Wolf, Belisario, any of these guys that were kind enough to hire me and believed in me, or me and Pete, as their musical guys, we never let them down. We never missed a deadline. And I don't think we ever disappointed those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I was lucky enough to moderate you at Peter Hackman's Fans to Film Music event, and we talked a little bit about flying. I believe you're a pilot. How much of that was inspiration for doing this album? And you just said, okay, I'm going to be doing this album. I'm going to take a road trip.
I did. If I was visualizing anything, I was envisioning driving across the Southwest, the South. I was thinking about East Tennessee and the Smokies and Kentucky, and I guess I really was, on a little bit of a mental road trip. Yeah, that's probably right.
Did you like have any kind of musical epiphanies during your time just being anywhere in the United States?
Oh, yes, sir. Absolutely. I go to jazz. Here's an epiphany. I go to Jazz Fest every year in New Orleans, and inevitably I end up in the gospel tent. And honestly, Daniel, you can't play me any music I don't intellectually understand. I mean, I've been doing this my whole life. Okay, I've studied and studied and studied, and I've been, very disciplined about, trying to listen to as much as I can and digest it in an intellectual way. So here's this guy with, pretty good knowledgeable, pretty good working knowledge of how all this stuff works. Okay, and comma, it's not complicated, guys. There's 12 of them, 12 different notes, and the 13th one's an octave. So this is not quantum physics or molecular biology or anything like that. This is, after Bach died, we're just repeating, what he laid down anyway. So, okay, it's finite. I go into the gospel tent. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. There's nothing you can play me I haven't heard. Okay. I sit down there and I see some 13-year-old drummer accompanying his 30-year-old mom and dad who are singing or playing guitars, and they're not making a cent. They're singing purely for the music and for the spirituality of it. And within 3 minutes, I'm in tears going, I don't know anything. This is magic. That lady probably made up the bed that I slept in last night in a hotel. And this guy drove the truck that delivered the makings of the dinner I'm going to have. I mean, I'm going, these aren't studio musicians. These aren't people from the conservatory. Oh, yeah. I don't know anything. This is magic. This is absolutely. So the epiphany comes from when I travel from, oh yeah, raised in LA, been doing this at a high level for a long time. And oh yeah, there's somebody with an open case in Dublin that's 18 years of age is just killing it. And you just go, oh man, this is unbelievable. The way it's just God smiling. It's art. It's art. It's magic.
I'd love to talk a little about your actual feature work. I believe you played on "In the Heat of the Night" for Quincy Jones.
That was my last gig as a session guitar player.
Wow. And you scored a cool little movie called The River Rat. There's actually a movie coming out in Blu-ray called Handgun that I have a credit on as well. What's that? Because in a way, when you look at this album, it really is kind of like a feature score in a way. Whereas a TV show might be bits and pieces, you don't really have the opportunity to go for 5 minutes or like any kind of extended length of time. And feature film scores provided you with that kind of an opportunity.
Yeah, but honestly, Daniel, it's not unusual that I'll do a 5-minute cue in TV. I've done 7-minute cues, 6-minute cues. Now, do you get to use 80, 90 guys in a TV score? No. And is the music coming through in a theatrical sense through great speaker systems in a big theater? No. But aside from that, and aside from in network TV, having commercials break up the drama, from a musical standpoint, there's not I don't look at it as really being that much different than film scoring. TV scoring seems to be the same. This album, it's big. So, okay, maybe it harkens more to what John's doing. But for instance, I don't think that the brilliant score for The Firm, that's just Dave Grusin playing piano, is not a film score. That's a film score, buddy, in my opinion, and a very good one. So, I think, I don't think the rules are hard and fast. I think the rules are a little bit up for interpretations. The films that I have done, by the way, that film Handgun, I was fired from. So I don't know if I got a credit on it, but I don't think they used my score. So at any rate, TV has worked really well for me because that was the opportunities I was afforded, so uh, uh, yeah, I'm a TV guy. Well, maybe TV plays into my wheelhouse a little. Uh, 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 it plays into it well because I'm ADHD and well, what were you thinking when you wrote such and such? Not a damn thing. I was just writing, I was just feeling. And so, I'm very typical of the guy that stands at you know at home plate at Yankee Stadium. He's a rookie and he gets up there. Here comes a 95-mile-an-hour breaking ball. Well, just hit it. Just hit the thing. Don't think about it. Just hit it. So, well, he's made 10 million swings in his young life, to get to that point. And I've been doing this since I was 6 in some form or another. So you bring me a television show or bring me a feature, I don't care, bring me a piece of film and ask me to put some music to it. I think I can do that. I believe I can,
Absolutely. Now Sway Wild would love to know, what is your favorite track on this new album?
Oh, I don't even profess to have one. I spent so much time doing this thing that I didn't listen to it. I don't think I've really listened to it as a whole piece for 4 or 5 months. And the other day, when the single dropped, this is about a month ago, I listened to it on Spotify just to hear and I went, oh man, that sounds really good. Wow. It was fresh to me. And so, the Campfire Breakdown thing that was the single, I went, oh, that's I guess, when I listened to that, that was my favorite. But then, I'm sure the same thing will be true of all the rest of it. I don't really have a favorite.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your wonderful TV work, I mean, I'm a big fan of 80s on 8 on Sirius, and whenever the song for The Greatest American Hero comes on, I just love that. But obviously, there's no song for the A-Team or the Rockford Files as great as that theme is. When do you do like a theme and you say to yourself, okay, this can be a song?
In the case of Believe It or Not, Cannell asked me, Steve Cannell, genius, said, hey, could this be a song with lyrics? The same thing for the theme from Blossom, with Dr. John singing, so we've done a number of them, that I've been involved in, mostly with a great lyricist named Stephen Geyer, who wrote those two. And in fact, I think everything that I've done for TV, mostly Stephen Geyer's been the lyricist. I did one where Cannell wrote the lyric for a short-lived series called Broken Badge, that was fun to do. Any rate, so it mainly comes from the producer to ask for a lyric and make it into a song.
Now, another question from Louis. Do you think in the not too distant future, you might write a book on all of your musical adventures? And also, he hopes one day there might be a complete CD box set from all of your music from Magnum PI. I mean, and on that note, I mean, you've written so much music, and in my opinion, so much more of it should be represented on CD or digital now.
I have no control over that. I'm No, I'm not going to write a book, Willie. And the reason I'm not going to write a book is, with the release of this, I've done some interviews, or quite a few interviews, because I would really like for people to listen to this because it's odd, it's different. These are mixtures of genres that don't usually coexist, and I think it's musical, and I like it, and I'd like people to listen to it. I think some percentage of the public would get something out of this. So that's the reason I'm doing interviews, and that's the reason I'm talking about myself. But on a day-to-day normal basis, I'm behind the curtain. I'm behind the scenes. I don't actually want to be famous. There's no part of me that wants to be famous. I love the fact that some people know about my music, and I love the fact that some people react to my music positively and think I'm good at my job and all that. But I have none of that star thing in me. I've worked with the biggest stars in the world, and they're different. When Dolly Parton walks out on that stage and the light hits her, magic happens. She's made for that. She dreamed about it her whole growing up time, and it happened, and she is unbelievable at it. And a big part of it is just inner DNA. And I'm exactly the opposite. I'm made for the studio. I'm made for behind the scenes. I'm not afraid to talk in front of an audience. I'm not afraid to play or conduct in front of an audience, but it isn't the reason I get up in the morning. The reason I get up in the morning is to compose music and be with other musicians in a studio setting. Will I ever do it live? Will I ever perform these pieces? I might. I really might.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that hit me when I was listening to this. It's like, boy, I'd love to see this done at the Hollywood Bowl or some venue like that.
Yeah, I'm hoping that somebody wants to have that happen. I'm hoping that somebody would be interested in an evening with Mike Post. So
Yeah.
I'd do the bluegrass piece first, do a 20-minute, medley of my theme songs with the visuals behind it, and then take a break, and then do the blues piece, and then have a glass of champagne. For me, to do that in front of a great orchestra would be a ball. Very hard to do, by the way, really hard to do. Not only from a conducting standpoint, but from the rhythm sections and the orchestra to being able to pull it off live. That's hard, buddy. It's hard. I know it's hard. So if we could pull that off and not completely wipe out, that would be cool.
I would totally be there for that show. So I guess my final question for you is, again, if you look at the kind of music that has emerged from this country, the actual music that's been born here, what do you think a listener, to this album who's drawn in by your other work, what do you want them to take away about America?
And
dog. My dog is a squirrel chaser. Now he's going to get to go out and chase a squirrel. There you go. Sorry about that.
No, it's great. Are you kidding me? I'm a dog lover.
You never know when it's going to happen.
That's great.
So again, I'm sorry. When someone listens to this album, what do you want them to take out of the music that this country has produced and about America just in general?
Well, so much emotion came from the struggle to get here without, sounding corny or anything. So much pain in slavery, in the Black experience in America. So much wrong produced so much misery, so much unfairness. But it also produced something beautiful in the blues. And to me, that's what art is. Art's a reflection of both sides of life. To be human, is to know great joy, and to be human is to be heartbroken, because that's what life is, you know. And I'm lucky that I've had very little of the heartbreak and a whole lot of joy. And I hope that's what a listener gets from this album.
Well, it's just an absolutely remarkable voyage, and congratulations on this really incredible concept album. It just totally brings images right into my head, man. Mike, I just want to thank you so much for joining us at Film Music Live. I want you all to get Message from the Mountain and Echoes of the Delta from Sony Classical. A big thanks to Jamie Bertel at Sony Classical for today's albums. And thanks to our producer, Dale Turner, and graphic designer, Mark Banning. And I'll be seeing you on the next Film Music Live on April 15th at 10 a.m. when we are joined by Civil War's Jeff Barrow and Ben Salisbury.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. You're awesome.
Yeah, I'll speak to you soon.